There is a war happening right now. 5 weeks ago, the United States and Israel launched nearly 900 strikes on Iran in a single night. They killed Iran's supreme leader. They targeted nuclear facilities, military infrastructure, and the heart of the regime. Iran responded by closing the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which 20% of the world's oil supply passes. Oil prices have crossed $100 a barrel. U.S. fighter jets have been shot down. Thousands of people are dead. And almost no one in the media is asking the question that actually matters. The answer is not 1979. It is not the hostage crisis. It is not the nuclear program. Everything you are watching unfold today has a root, and that root is 1953. It starts with a document that existed for 50 years before the public was allowed to see it. It describes, in the dry bureaucratic language of intelligence work, how the government of a sovereign democratic nation was systematically dismantled. Not with armies, not with bombs, with cash, with forged newspapers, with hired crowds, and with one operative who refused to stop, even when his own government ordered him to. In 1951, Iran had something genuinely rare in the region: a functioning democracy. Free elections, a free press, a parliament that actually legislated, and a prime minister chosen, unambiguously, by the Iranian people. His name was Mohammad Mosaddegh. He was 69 years old when he took office. He had spent his entire career as a constitutionalist and a nationalist. His central promise was straightforward: nationalize the oil. For decades, Iran's oil had been extracted and sold by a British corporation, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. Under the terms of the original concession, Iran received 16% of net profits. By the late 1940s, the company's profits had grown so large that what it paid in taxes to the British government alone exceeded everything it paid to Iran. Iranian workers operated the refineries. Iranian land held the oil. Iranian families lived in poverty in the shadow of the derricks they maintained. In March 1951, the Iranian parliament voted unanimously to nationalize the oil industry. The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company was expelled, the company you know today as BP. In London, the reaction was fury. In Washington, it was concern. Britain had tried to resolve the oil dispute through negotiation. It had failed. It had tried an international boycott of Iranian oil, effectively blockading Iran's economy. That had weakened Mossadegh's government significantly, but he had not collapsed. By late 1952, Britain turned to the United States. Mossaddegh, they said, was unstable, a nationalist who could be exploited by Soviet communists. It was 1953. That argument was the key that opened every door in Washington. Eisenhower approved the operation. A budget of $1 million was authorized. The plan was given a code name: TP Ajax. The operative chosen to run it was a 37-year-old CIA officer named Kermit Roosevelt Jr. He was the grandson of President Theodore Roosevelt. A colleague once described him as the last person you would expect to be up to his neck in dirty tricks. He entered Tehran in July 1953, quietly, by car, across the Iraqi border. A tourist, to all appearances. A man with a suitcase. Inside that suitcase was cash. CIA money flowed to Iranian newspaper editors, who began publishing stories portraying Mossaddegh as a communist sympathizer. It flowed to members of parliament, who began raising objections to his government. It flowed to street gangs and hired crowds, paid to create the appearance of mass unrest. Provocateurs were paid to pose as Mossadegh supporters and attack religious leaders, deliberately driving a wedge between his government and Iran's clergy. The goal was simple: make a legitimate elected government look like it was losing control. The operation had a first phase. The Shah would sign royal decrees dismissing Mossaddegh and replacing him with a pro-Western general. When the Shah's messenger arrived with the dismissal decree, Mosaddegh had him arrested. The Shah did not wait. He fled the country, first to Baghdad, then to Rome, where he sat in a hotel room waiting to see if he still had a throne. In Washington, the conclusion was immediate. The operation had been compromised. The CIA sent an urgent message to Roosevelt in Tehran: abort, stand down, return home. Roosevelt ignored it. He believed the operation could still succeed. He had 4 days, cash that had not yet been spent, and a network still in place. Without authorization, without a safety net, he kept going. On August 19th, 4 days after the failed first attempt, Roosevelt's second phase executed. Pro-Shah military units moved through Tehran. Paid crowds filled the streets alongside genuine Shah supporters. By that afternoon, it was over. 300 people died in the fighting across Tehran that day, then transferred to house arrest at his estate in the village of Ahmadabad. He never held office again. He never left. The Shah returned from Rome. Kermit Roosevelt returned to Washington, where CIA Director Allen Dulles reportedly greeted him with a standing ovation. In 1954, a new oil agreement was negotiated. British Petroleum held 40%, Royal Dutch Shell held 14%, and 5 American oil companies, predecessors of ExxonMobil and Chevron, each held 8%, a combined American share of 40%. The United States had entered the operation as Britain's Cold War partner, concerned about Soviet influence. It left with nearly half of Iran's oil. The Shah ruled Iran for the next 26 years. He invested in modernization, infrastructure, education, land reform. But political opposition was not permitted. His secret police, Savak, were trained with CIA assistance. The number imprisoned during his reign ran into the tens of thousands. For a generation of Iranians, the memory of 1953 did not fade. It became the foundational political fact of modern Iranian life, the proof that democratic governments could be removed, that Western powers would do it, and that no elected leader was safe from it. In January 1979, the Shah fled the country for the final time. The revolution that replaced his government was led by Ayatollah Khomeini, a cleric who built his authority in part on the argument that Western interference in Iranian affairs had never stopped and never would. In November 1979, Iranian students seized the American embassy in Tehran. The 52 American diplomats held hostage for 444 days. The students who took them specifically cited 1953 as their justification. They feared, with some historical basis, that the embassy was being used to plan another coup. Iran's supreme leader would later say, "We are not liberals like Allende and Mosaddegh, whom the CIA can snuff out." That line was not nostalgia, it was policy, and it has been policy for 70 years. Mohammad Mosaddegh died on March 5, 1967. He had spent the last 14 years of his life under house arrest. He asked to be buried alongside those killed during the 1953 coup. The Shah refused. He was buried on his own property, alone, where he had lived out his last years. In 2013, 60 years after the fact, the CIA formally acknowledged its role in the coup. Thousands of pages of cables, memos, and operational reports were released to the public. They confirmed what historians had argued for decades. Operation Ajax was real. The coup was deliberate. The democracy was dismantled by design. Now look at today. The United States has launched its largest military operation in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Iran's foreign minister says trust with America is at zero. Iran's parliament voted to close the Strait of Hormuz, the same strait through which Iran's oil once flowed freely, before a British boycott in 1951 helped set these events in motion. The same oil, the same strait, the same fundamental question of who controls Iran's sovereignty. 73 years later, every Iranian leader who refuses to negotiate, every missile launched, every proxy funded, points back to the same moment. 1953. When America and Britain dissolved a democracy, not because Mossadegh was a threat, but because he wanted Iran to own what was under its own feet. History is sometimes made by armies and treaties, and sometimes by a man with a suitcase, crossing a border quietly, with a plan his own government had already told him to abandon. The consequences of that suitcase are still unfolding, right now, on your screens, today. The next video in this series covers the Cold War operation that pumped $630 million a year into Afghanistan, armed the most dangerous fighters on Earth, and then walked away. The men America armed to fight the Soviets didn't disappear when the war ended. They had other plans. Subscribe so you don't miss it.